I gave up my engineering degree so she could become a doctor. People always say love is about sacrifice. Back then, I believed that with all my heart. My name is Noah, and the biggest mistake I ever made started on the first day of college. It was orientation day. The auditorium was packed with nervous students looking for seats. I found one near the middle, and a few seconds later, a girl walked over with a warm smile. "Is this seat taken?" she asked. I shook my head. "Go ahead." That was the first time I met Olivia. She wasn't the loudest person in the room, but she had kind eyes, an easy smile, and a quiet confidence that drew people in. We spent the entire orientation talking instead of listening, laughing about how confusing campus was and joking that we'd probably get lost before classes even start. By the end of the day, we'd exchanged phone numbers. Neither of us knew that one conversation would change our lives forever. Over the next few months, we became inseparable. I was studying engineering, while Olivia had just started medical school. Becoming a doctor wasn't just her dream. It was a promise she'd made to herself as a little girl. But behind her smile was a heavy burden. Her family struggled financially, and she constantly worried about her younger siblings. Sometimes she'd skip meals or put back expensive medical textbooks because she couldn't afford them. My situation wasn't much better. I relied on student loans and worked every job I could find: morning shifts at a coffee shop, evenings at a grocery store, and weekend deliveries. Most nights, I barely slept before rushing back to class. Still, we kept each other going. As medical school became more demanding, Olivia couldn't keep working part-time. One evening, she broke down. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," she whispered. "I'm trying to study, work, and help my family, but I'm failing." I couldn't bear seeing her like that, so I started helping. First, it was groceries. Then her textbooks, her rent, her exam fees. Before I knew it, I was carrying both our responsibilities. To afford everything, I worked even longer hours. My grades slipped. I missed classes. I fell asleep during lectures. One afternoon, a professor stopped me. "You have potential, Noah," he said. "But if this continues, you won't graduate." I already knew. A week later, Olivia and I sat in our favorite little cafe. "I can't keep doing both," I admitted. "I'm falling behind." She reached for my hand. "So, what are we going to do?" I took a deep breath. "One of us has to make it. Medical school can't wait. I'll leave school, work full-time, and when life is more stable, I'll come back and finish my degree." "You'd really do that for me?" I smiled. "For us." A week later, I signed the papers that withdrew me from college. At the time, I believed I was giving up my dream so the woman I loved could achieve hers. I had no idea that decision would cost me far more than a degree. Leaving college was the hardest decision I had ever made. The morning after I withdrew, I stood outside the campus gates for almost 20 minutes, watching students walk to their classes. Some were laughing. Some were carrying books. Others were rushing because they were late. That was supposed to be me. Instead, I climbed onto a bus and headed to my new full-time job. One job quickly became two. Two became three. During the day, I worked at a construction supply warehouse. In the evenings, I stocked shelves at a supermarket. Whenever I had a free weekend, I accepted delivery shifts just to earn a little more. Every dollar already had a purpose before I even earned it. Another part went toward Olivia's tuition. Then there were her medical textbooks, lab fees, licensing exams, rent, groceries, and sometimes even money she sent home to help her parents and younger siblings. There were months when I couldn't remember the last time I bought something for myself. My clothes became worn out. My phone screen stayed cracked because I couldn't afford to replace it. I skipped meals more times than I could count just to make sure Olivia never had to choose between studying and paying a bill. One winter, her old car finally broke down. She was devastated. Without a car, getting to the hospital for her clinical rotations would become almost impossible. She apologized over and over, saying she'd figure something out. But I already knew what I was going to do. I sold my own car. It wasn't new or expensive, but it was the only reliable thing I owned. With the money, I bought her a dependable used car and paid the insurance. From that day on, I took buses to work, sometimes leaving home before sunrise and not returning until almost midnight. When Olivia found out what I had done, she burst into tears. "Noah, why would you do this?" I smiled, even though my feet ached from standing all day. "Because one day you'll be saving lives. Getting you there is more important than me driving to work." She hugged me so tightly that I could barely breathe. "I promise," she whispered through her tears. "I won't let your sacrifices be for nothing." Whenever she saw me come home exhausted, she'd sit beside me, hold my hand, and tell me the same thing. "Just a little longer. We're almost there. When I become a doctor, I'm going to take care of you the way you've taken care of me." Those words became my strength. Every overtime shift, every sleepless night, every missed meal, every dream I put on hold. I endured it because I believed in us. And whenever I started wondering if it was all worth it, I'd look at Olivia wearing her white lab coat during training. I'd see the smile on her face, and I'd tell myself the finish line was finally in sight. I just didn't know that sometimes, the closer you get to your dream, the less you notice that someone else is quietly walking away from it. The day Olivia graduated from medical school felt like the day both of us crossed the finish line. I stood near the front of the auditorium, barely blinking as I watched her walk across the stage. When they called her name, I was the first person on my feet, clapping so hard my hands stung. She spotted me in the crowd and smiled. When the ceremony ended, she ran straight into my arms. "We did it," she whispered, holding me tightly. "Not, I did it," she said. "We did it." Those two words meant more to me than she could ever imagine. A few weeks later, Olivia started her residency at one of the busiest hospitals in the city. The hours were demanding. Some mornings she left before the sun came up, and some nights she came home too exhausted to finish dinner. Whenever she apologized for being tired, I'd smile and tell her not to worry. "You've worked too hard to get here," I'd say. "I'll take care of everything else." Then life took an unexpected turn. My grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep. She had raised me with more love than money, and losing her felt like losing the last piece of my childhood. After the funeral, her lawyer handed me a folder. Inside was her will. It was old and badly in need of repairs, but the moment I stepped inside, I didn't see cracked walls or faded paint. I saw our future. I painted walls, repaired cabinets, fixed the leaking roof, and cleared years of weeds from the backyard. Whenever Olivia had a free evening, she'd stop by after work, still wearing her hospital scrubs. She'd bring dinner, laugh at the paint on my clothes, and help me choose colors for each room. One night, as we sat on the living room floor eating pizza from the box, she pointed toward the spare bedroom. "I think this would make a beautiful nursery someday." I looked at her and smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." A few months later, the house was finally finished. I invited Olivia over, telling her I wanted her opinion on one last thing. When she walked through the front door, candles were glowing, flowers filled the room, and soft music played in the background. She looked at me with tears already forming in her eyes. I reached into my pocket, got down on one knee, and held out a ring. "Olivia," I said, "from the day we met, you've been the best part of my life. Will you marry me?" She nodded before I had even finished asking. "Yes," she whispered through tears. "Of course I'll marry you." For the first time in years, it felt like life was finally giving us a chance to breathe. Then one evening, while we were comparing invitation designs, Olivia's phone lit up. She looked at the screen, and for a split second, her smile disappeared. "I'll be right back," she said quietly. She stepped outside to answer the call. When she came back, she acted as if nothing had happened. I believed her, until I noticed something I'd never seen before. She unlocked her phone with a passcode. It seemed like such a small change. I had no idea. It was the beginning of everything that would eventually tear our lives apart. 2 weeks before our wedding, Olivia came home looking exhausted. "The hospital is sending me to a medical conference for a week," she said. "It's important for my residency." I smiled and hugged her. "You've worked too hard for this. Don't worry about the wedding. I'll take care of everything while you're gone." The next morning, I helped her load her suitcase into the car. Before she left, she kissed me. "I'll be back before the wedding." "I'll be waiting," I replied. The first week passed quickly. She called every evening, but our conversations became shorter. She blamed long lectures, networking dinners, and early mornings. I never questioned her. Exactly 1 week before our wedding, she called again. "They've extended the conference for a few more days," she said. "I'll be home before the wedding. I promise." I smiled. "We've still got a week. Just come home safely. I love you too." When the call ended, I looked around the house my grandmother had left me. Everything was ready. The flowers had been ordered. The venue was confirmed. My wedding suit was hanging in the closet. I had no idea that during that same week, while I was preparing to marry the woman I loved, she was preparing to marry someone else. 2 days later, while going over our final wedding checklist, I opened social media. A mutual friend had posted wedding photos. The bride was Olivia, standing beside another man. Congratulations to Dr. Olivia and Dr. Ethan. Wishing you both a lifetime of happiness. I stared at the screen, hoping I was imagining it. I wasn't. I called her again and again until she finally answered. Why, was all I could ask. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, I never meant for you to find out like this. She told me she had fallen in love with Ethan. That working together every day had changed everything. The days that followed felt like a nightmare. One by one, I canceled everything we'd spent months planning. The venue, the caterer, the florist. Every phone call forced me to explain there wouldn't be a wedding after all. Each apology I heard only made the pain worse. When I got home, my wedding suit was still hanging in the closet. I stood there for a long time before quietly zipping it back into its garment bag. For the first time, I allowed myself to cry. Not because I'd lost a wedding, but because I'd lost the future I thought we were going to build together. Later, I learned something that hurt almost as much. Several of our mutual friends had known. They knew I was still planning our wedding. But no one told me. For months, I struggled to move forward until my sister convinced me to try therapy. Little by little, I stopped blaming myself for someone else's choices. Healing didn't happen overnight. It happened one ordinary day at a time. Months later, I heard Olivia's marriage wasn't as perfect as everyone believed. I didn't ask for details. It wasn't my story anymore. For a long time, I thought losing Olivia was the greatest pain I'd ever experience. Now I know. The greatest mistake I made was losing myself while trying to hold on to someone who had already let go. And finally, I was learning how to find myself again. The end.